Hey review family, keep it tight. My name is Jay Moore's the Review Guy, reviewing music for the love of music, and I'm back again to bring you another video, and in this one I'm going to be covering the new Trivium record, entitled What the Dead Men Say. This is the 9th studio-length album by the American heavy metal band Trivium. Trivium is nothing but consistent with output to many fans, and it leaves a lot of detractors skeptical, to say the least. For me personally, it is a little bit turbulent, it occasionally is a little bit hit or miss for me. However, Trivium is right up there with the pantheon of metalcore bands in the 2000s that hit their stride and really brought it up to prominence. That is an indisputable fact. Your Killswitch Engages, your As I Lay Dyings, your Shadows Fall, your Bullet for My Valentines, just to name a few. Much akin to the bands that I just mentioned, Trivium's metalcore sound is very much derived from thrash metal a lot of times. Lofty and imposing choruses that sound the horns for the heavens, and thrash metal-inspired throttling riffs. Sticky refrains and build-ups that swoop directly down into all-encompassing and crushing breakdowns and metallic solos. Bottom line, that purist approach is not necessarily as purist as you might first think. With many of the hardcore punk and crossover thrash bands of the 1980s being the inception point for metalcore before the terminology had even been invented, it took two parts to make the whole story, hardcore punk and heavy metal, and nowadays the punk is very few and far between, but that's another rant for another time. With Alex Bent taking the reins of the drum work on their last record, The Sin and the Sentence, the bar was set really high. They are arena-sized, humongous. Some of the snare work and kicks could roar out in a stadium and cause a sonic inferno, and no one would question it, because they'd be too busy headbanging to even notice it. Look, Sin and the Sentence was great. They've definitely become more and more friendly towards the average listener that maybe doesn't enjoy metalcore all the time, that isn't a big fan of the extremely heavy type sounding down-tuned bands, the current strain of metalcore and deathcore, not to mention slam metal and brutal death metal. You can call that dulling their sound, but you know what I call that? A fucking dull response. Considering 2000s metalcore blew up because of accessibility, if nothing else. The singles released beforehand, before this record, were very solid, the self-titled track especially, which is funny because I am a little bit iffy on Catastrophist to some degree. It does feel a tad bit long-winded in the length department, and Trivium dragging out a track to over 6 minutes worth of material can feel a little bit gratuitous, or at least become a little bit long-winded. I mean, this isn't something they're necessarily unfamiliar with, considering that one of the tracks off their last record breached the 7-minute mark. Trivium and length are not things that can't go hand in hand. Regarding Trivium in general, and this track and this record, the bob your head along riffs and Matt's vocals, which have become ubiquitous for the metalcore genre, and he has went on to influence a lot of people, not to mention the rippling drums, are enough to carry a Trivium track and at least keep it interesting enough to where you're involved, your blood's boiling, the adrenaline is high, but is it enough to really pack out a track to be sonically interesting, adventurous, or boundary pushing as Trivium was in their peak, in their prime, in their first albums? Not necessarily, but at this point I don't think people are necessarily expecting that. Who's going into a Trivium record hoping that they're going to do some massive thing? Certainly their past few records have incorporated more and more progressive metal elements into their sound, and instrumentally they have become a lot more capable to different time signatures, different playing techniques, different riffage, and the licks are definitely more fleshed out, more well-defined, more refined than ever before and ever prior on prior releases back in their early canon. But at the same time, let's just be honest here, Trivium isn't the most sonically adventurous band out there. My only issue here with quite a few tracks is dragging on tracks an unnecessary amount of time and repeating choruses more than you necessarily need to repeat a chorus. It's not so much that the choruses aren't well written, it's just on occasion it can make a track feel like it's losing a bit of steam, losing a bit of momentum, and the wear and tear kind of starts to settle in, and you start to really feel that, and it reveals that. The chorus on Catastrophist, for example, slaps, but it just gets to be a bit much, especially on repeated listens with the very long length. They hold it together, I'm not saying they don't, but near the latter half, the initial grit does begin to wear off a little bit. In many ways, though, this Trivium record, even more so than The Sin and the Sentence, which I would argue has more progressive elements than this record, It's difficult to talk about this record through a critical scope, because compositionally, what's good about this record is instantaneously good. It's instantaneously catchy. The riff writing, the vocal lines, the chorus work, the production work, it all is right in your face. It's blunt. It's right there in front of you. They don't necessarily leave anything to be desired. It's hard hitting in all the right places, and from a songwriting point of view, it is straight up. It really does skip the bullshit. It skips the hyperbole entirely. One of my favorite tracks on this record is Amongst the Shadows and the Stone. The vigorous energy is so hard to dissect because it is so in your face and so instantly catchy that you can't look away. And instrumentally, there's nothing mind-blowing about this track. There's such a thing as just writing a good song. When Matt, the lead vocalist, talked about how this record is the band finally starting to work, I can kind of feel where he's coming from. They really did turn the wheel so many times that it began to grow rusted, and now this does feel like a bit of a renaissance, a bit of a resurgence. They are replacing the wheel with something more Trivium than ever. More updated, a little bit of a touch-up, but not losing the original formula. Upping the bar of production and performance without losing their initial kick. And speaking of Matt, I love the dude. If you haven't seen his live talking performances, go check him out. I really respect him and have a ton of admiration for him, both as an artist and just a human being on a human level. Not only is his passion for his craft through the roof, but he's thrilling to listen to even though he is quite quiet. He's very eloquent, and that translates in a very strong way in his songwriting. From the musical equivalent of a hot poker that is the track The Defiant, to the sudden blast beats on the track Bending the Arc to Fear that transition directly into a very high-octane soaring chorus. Every bit of this record just breathes knowledge, even in the weaker section. Knowledge for the craft and the ability to craft a record that is going to be widely accepted by fans and people that maybe don't like metalcore. That being said, will this record turn Trivium haters, die-hard Trivium haters, into believers? Not necessarily. Hating Trivium for whatever reason is pretty popular nowadays. And at the end of the day, this record doesn't do anything so diametrically opposed to their previous material that it's going to make some major difference to people that don't already like their sound. Because in many ways, this record does feel like it is riding the coattails a bit of their past few records and just generally the 2000s metalcore sound that they were birthed from and that they helped put on the map. But for this record, everything good about it, it's right there. It's right there. I've said it and I'll say it again. So if you want a hard-hitting metalcore record from the titans of the genre, give this a shot. You won't regret it. And obviously, if you're a Trivium fan, you're gonna enjoy it anyway, I promise. Either way, I'm going to be giving this record a 7.5 out of 10. And that is a wrap. Have you heard this new Trivium record, What the Dead Men Say? If you have, let me know in the comment section below what you thought about it. I would love to discuss a record with you. Be sure to stay for the end screen. I'll link some videos that you might be interested in. Like this video if you enjoyed it, subscribe to join the review family today, and smash that notification bell to be notified of my future uploads. You know who it is. My name is James Third. You guys, I'm signing off. Maybe we could